So we can say the explanation in all of these questions that the Rebbe asked before. Was der Posik ubekutz bechem begoimer steht da in Parshas Amoedes bechlal und nicht in Amoke meyuchat fardi mitzvahs. The fact that the Posik put down over here this mitzvah in the Parshas Amoedes about the Chelek Pa'asotcha and Leket Kitzircha, and not in some special place for these mitzvahs, that's not a problem. Is lefi pshuto shel mikra derech Rashi bepirushe kinkashin. So Rashi's style of explaining things according to the pshat, that's not a problem. Why we placed it over here in the middle of the Yom Tov Moedes, because actually this seems to be a proper place, because the whole discussion is as it relates to the mitzvahs of cutting the grain, cutting the fields, and we bring about the Emor, and then we bring about the shtei halechem, the mincha chadosha from the wheat, and then we also tell you another mitzvah. So it seems to be a reasonable place for the Torah to mention that. Rashi's problem is, as the Ramban says, why repeat it? Let's say, Aderech Hapshat, kommt das behemshach zu der früher gesagte beparshas u'mitzvahs. According to the Pshat, it comes as a follow-up to the above mentioned in this parsha the mitzvahs. Was der pasuk zog? The verse says, on bekesher zu ktsiras hatvua. That has been instructed. The verse tells you as far as it relates to the cutting of the grain. At Heipton Frier, the verse begins in the beginning, Kisovoyu el ha'aretz, when you come to the land, and you cut the when you're going to cut the field, the grain, so you shall bring the Emor, etc. Der noch steht der Ansag, and then there is the instruction von mincha chadasha. You bring the new mincha, that would be the wheat, the new wheat, the carbon that you bring, the shtei halechem, which you bring on Shavuos, mincha chadasha. So we talk about the Emor that you bring from the barley on Pesach. We talk about the wheat that you cut later on after the season of the cutting of the barley. You start cutting the wheat. The mincha chadasha has to come from the wheat by the shtei halechem, was we bring b'chag ha-Shavuos min ha-chodesh from chitim, that you bring on the festival of Shavuos from the new grain of the chitim, the wheat, like the karbonis, the shtei halechem, the minchas. And a follow-up to that, zogt on the Torah noch mitzvahs. The Torah commands, instructs further mitzvahs, was eine verbunden mit ktsiras hatvua, which are connected to the cutting of the grain. So that's not a problem that it doesn't belong here. It does belong here, because these are part of the mitzvahs that have to do with cutting of the grain. Rashi's issue is Rashi b'perusha b'avorim b'ikar. Mainly what Rashi is coming to answer over here, Pavos the Torah is mazhir if the mitzvahs from leket upeya tzveiten mol. Why is the Torah warning us about these specific two mitzvahs of leket and peya, which we learned in the parshas of Kedoshim? The Torah singles out and talks just about these two mitzvahs and tells us a second time that we should do that. So why is the Torah warning us a second time about the mitzvah leket upeya tzveiten mol? No, them tzivu in parshas Kedoshim, after the command in the portion of Kedoshim, as it is madgish, that actually emphasizes this issue that it's the second time, not just that it's mentioned here. He says, "V'tam lahaskir v'chulu pam shenis." Why is it the reason for mentioning a second time? That problem that bothered the Ibn Ezra is actually what's bothering Rashi. And therefore, Rashi's issue is that, and that's why the first thing Rashi says, that the Torah repeated a second time what and says it again, so that you'll be violating two lavim. So if you collect the leket and shivcha, you'll be violating two lavim. So, and for that reason, the Rebbe says, since exactly because this is a repetition, is Rashi doesn't like the interpretation of the Ibn Ezra, we can say, the Rebbe explains, because if they like the Ibn Ezra, since we're talking already about the mitzvahs of Ktsir Chitim, so the Torah already reminds you about a previous obligation, as Ibn Ezra says. So how come the Torah singled out only leket and peya? What about the other things that are mentioned over there in the Parshat? Torah talks over there. In addition, how come we didn't remind you about those? Is a sim, it's not about reminder. This is about making another lav. Why is there only an additional lav for peya and leket? That's not a question. The Torah, some things the Torah makes a second lav. Now let's look inside. My time a goof is moving for the same reason. It's understood. Those was Rashi learned need with Ibn Ezra. This that Rashi does not learn as the Ibn Ezra does. He's Irshaloti Shokach Mashet Zivisicha. Last is that he reminds you, warns you now over here that you should not forget this which I commanded you. So then he should have mentioned the other things too. In Parshas Kedoshim, and the first time when it's mentioned, together with the command on pay and leket, the pasuk also says, not to take the small grapes and not to take the collecting the other leftover, the peret of the karmachol, different sizes, smaller of the karmachol, not to collect them. And how come the Torah doesn't remind you about them? If the Torah needs to instruct you again, the mitzvah is b'negei an oni, as far as an b'negei an oni, k'dei shalei tishokach. Torah tells you now about the poor person. Leave him the payah, leave him the leket. Don't forget about the poor person, so that you don't forget. But the Torah should have also repeated the mitzvah from karmachol, so a little peret v'goyim. The Torah should have repeated that as well. Is from them muchav. So from this, it's evident as mahot nit moire farshikha ukayetzubai. That we're not really worried about forgetting or similar to that by the mitzvahs. And you actually see this. Where does the Torah have to remind you again so don't forget? As the Torah the Torah doesn't remind you a second time. Not all the time when the time comes. So over here, you're saying the time comes. We're talking about Ksir Chitim, reminds you again. We don't find the Torah reminding you, even not always when the time comes. Amazon didn't vergessen zu mekayim sein. Don't forget to fulfill them. So that's why the Rebbe learned Rashi. That's why Rashi learns, as the Chazir V'Shon is not to remind you, is lavir aleim b'shnei lavim, but rather to say that you will be over on two violations. How come the Torah only tells you two violations for leket and peya? What about oilos, peret and the oilos from the kerem? How come the Torah decided as his over of shnei lavim, that as mizoyim b'shnei lavin, that you'll be violating two lavin, davke by the mitzvahs, not by others, specifically by the mitzvahs and not others. Rashi is mefarish, as Rashi explains, Harbe mitzvahs b'Torah nemru v'nichpelu chulu. A lot of mitzvahs in Torah have been said, and they have been duplicated, l'chai v'lanish, to make the person guilty and to punish, to the number of prohibition in them. So why does the Torah want to increase the number of prohibition on one or the other? That's not a question. When Pshuta Shel Mikra, Hotkin Ortni zu fragen, no, it doesn't have room to ask. It's not a question to ask. How come they are different than the others? So, the first thing the Rebbe establishes over here, that what Rashi is bothered by is not why did we stick in the mitzvah lek in the pay middle of the Parshas Moedes. That wouldn't be a problem, but the question is why is it repeated b'chlal? And that Rashi answers to Lav. Now the Rebbe is going to explain. Once Rashi says that the whole reason why these mitzvahs are duplicated here is because of Tulavi. So then the question becomes, why did the Torah have to stick him in specifically in this place? And the Rebbe is going to explain also the very specific wording in this Rashi. Let's look inside. Davke, Novdem, specifically after them Pirush, after Rashi's explanation, that the reason why it's duplicated is to do a double to Lavi, Stelzer, make it the Shaila. So now, mainly the question is, now the question becomes, why did the Torah give it in the middle of the holidays? And it only has room for a question. When does it applicable? This question is when the Emtzar Golim, that the two holidays, not just Emtzar Golim, the Rebbe asked before, but specifically when the Rashi enumerates, articulates, is Ba'if Pesach V'Atzeres Mikan, V'Rosh Hashanah V'Yem V'Kippurim V'Chag Mikan. That on one hand we have Pesach and Atzeres, and the Rosh Hashanah, and then on the other side you have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, and then the Rebbe is going to basically explain in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Chag, that's still before the time that you gather in the grain. The grain is gathered in the Chag HaOsif. Why does the Torah stick it into a place right here in between? Let's look inside. Let me explain. Then the Azhara Funu Bekutzrecha V'Goymer Vol Gemeint Anayin Tzivu Pei V'Leket. If the Azhara, this warning would have meant a new instruction for Pei V'Leket, which means if this would have been something new, not a duplication, so then you could explain Kinal as the Pasuk told with the mitzvahs of Pei V'Leket. Then you can say, why does the Torah, the verse, place the mitzvah Pei V'Leket over here? This would be just like, and as a follow-up, that he says the other commandments, as it relates to the cutting of the grain. Since it's a command and it's a new prohibition, the Pasuk writes it over here, and also Kedem is only Meinen, as with the open the Monte, mitzvahs that the above mentioned mitzvahs over here was eine verbunden mit Ktziras HaTavua. So we were talking about different mitzvahs as they associate to the mitzvah of Ktziras HaTavua, the Emor, and the Shtei Alechem. So you can say, okay, now it's done. So you shouldn't think that, and the mitzvahs beim Kotzim. So then you can think, okay, once he took care of the Emor, once he took care of the Shtei Alechem, now there's no more issues with this. He can just take everything for himself. Al derech, Pirush, and the Mefarshim is like the third of the other Mefarshim say that, once you're done, you did already the mitzvah. So the Torah places over here. We would say if this was the place of the mitzvah, Rabbi is trying to explain how this Umara is a follow-up to what the Rashi just explained. If Rashi would have somehow explained what is this mitzvah, that it's like something new, if it's a new mitzvah, then we understand why it belongs over here. But since we just said that it's nothing new, it's just a duplication from the previous mitzvah, lav shnei lavim, and nor bekutzchem es ksir artzechem seinen da noch mitzvahs. No, so we're saying that don't think that all the mitzvahs ended once you gave the oimer, gave the shtalechem. Nor bekutzchem es ksir artzechem. The Torah is telling you seinen da noch mitzvahs. Makes sense the Torah to tell you that there's additional mitzvahs. Which one needs to do? Either we can nemen before you can take the field and benefit from it. It tells you don't finish off the edge of the field, but like a circle looks like it, and don't collect the cut off those that are left behind. But this is a hemshech to before. The warning is just so that you will be violating two prohibitions. Not that this is the prohibition. So then it would only be reasonable, fitting that it should be written over here. And not in a similar portion as in contents as the parsha that is written in the first time, in such a scenario like by Kedoshim to you, to have something like that, and not in the middle of the Mayados. So why? It's only if it has some sort of a connection of its contents to the parsha, because otherwise, just to duplicate it, just to tell you have a second lav over here, find a more appropriate place, which would match up with the way it was written the first time. Because this is not something that we need to caution you over here. That's not, because in this case, we're not saying that it's written here because of telling you something over here. We're just telling you to duplicate so that you have two lavim. The mitzvah from Freire Canal. You already know the mitzvah from before. And the reason for the pasuk writing over here is not trying to tell you something about the mitzvah itself. It's just trying to tell you that there is two lavim for this mitzvah. So why stick it in a place like over here, which is not similar to the first time? But in our case, this pasuk is written amongst matters was is nit azoifel the mitzvahs should considered. Their main contents is not so much the mitzvahs of cutting, nor mitzvah karbonim. The carbon is the main crux of the psukim over there. The main thrust, the theme of the psukim has to do with the karbonis from the regalim from the Yomim Tovim. So Rashi says, you have Pesach v'Atzeres Mekan, Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim, and also Chag. Mekan is Rebbe will address the Chag. So Rashi needs to specify, but Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim hot nit kein shayches zu Ksiris Atvo. So the Rebbe's idea over here that he brings down that on one hand you have Pesach v'Atzeres, which Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, which have totally no connection to the cutting of the grain. So, which basically means these parshas are not talking about Yom Tov. From this, it's understood as the ganze parsha is Zikra Karbonos Amoedes, that the entire portion is mainly the sacrifices of the Yom Tovim. Tovi Pasdar Ein Das Hore Laver B'Shnei Laver. So how does it fit over here? You're saying that it is for two lavim. Why did it stick it in the two lavim amongst the middle of the Parshas Mayadis, and the other side isn't even talking about? We're not saying middle of Mayadis. We're talking about on the side which has nothing to do with Kitzir, because it's talking about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim and Sukkot, but it doesn't have nothing to do with the Kitzir. And here the Torah puts in Lav Rishnei Lav and negates Pei V'Leket as far as it relates to Pei and Leket. Zayin. So that's why Rashi has to explain now of them kumt der tirus. So to answer this, we have the answer. The lamdoch. This is to teach you shakol hanoisin leket shikha upeya. Rashi says anybody who gets the leket and the shikha. Rashi adds here the shikha, the pay we mentioned before. La'oni karoi. You give it properly to the oni. Malin olav akosuk. Then the pasuk counts it for him. Ki ilu bona beis hamikdash, as if he built the beis hamikdash. V'hikrev olav karbonos karbonos b'soicha, and he brought inside the beis hamikdash on the mizbeach the karbonos. This is all equivalent to one who gets like a shikha. What does this mean? That's better for them. What is the connection? What is the connection? The karbonis that one gives equal is similar to the leket shikha that you give to the honor. Shaykhs of Raglaich from Atnas Adim Tzakaro Krovis karbonis is moving. The connection. Generally, talk about the gifts you give to the poor, and the offering of a korban is understood. What is a korban? Shame the korban is Haben Zichon. Von Adam Kiyakri Mikem Belim, and I guess a person brings an offering to Hashem. He has to give something that belongs to him. You can't give something which starts off Mikem. It has to be yours. In other words, you have to give something away of yourself. I guess that is makri from Gita Vek. What you're doing is you take something that is yours from Zaina to Mizbeach v'Koyin, to the altar and to the Koyin. The parts, the Mizbeach parts go to the Koyin. Leid them tzivu from the Meibers according to the instruction from Hashem. Taking something of yours to give away to Hashem and the Koyin. Similar. It's also by the gifts of the poor. But that is Mekayim the Tziva Hashem, that he fulfills Hashem's command to give him for Zayin Tvua to the Ani, that he fulfills to give from his grain to the poor people. So he takes something that belongs to him and he gives it away. He gives it to the poor people. Korban gives it to Hashem and the Mizbeah and the Kohanim. Here he gives it to the poor people. And he gives up from Zayin and Nechosim. He gives from his assets to the Aniyim, laid them tzivu for the Meibers, based on the instruction of Hashem. Hashem instructs to give korban. Hashem instructs to give to the Aniyim. So why are we saying like a chikha? Why are we saying you always, whenever you give matzanim? So anytime you give tzedakah laniyim, why are we singling out leket shikha pei? Is this over by the matones leket shikha peya? The Yasser says these particular gifts, the leket, the shikha, and the peya, is with more force, in a special way. You worked on this field. The reason you're cutting this field, you invested energy and koiches until you were able to cut the field. Here, the Torah is telling you to give something that you invested in. If you just give a poor person a gift, maybe you got it as an inheritance. Maybe it came easy to you. Let's look inside. That's why Rashi says by these three things. By stam tzedakah, when we're talking about stock in general, can gemol sein, it's possible. As das Geld, was gibt, hat verdient liyigia. Maybe the money that he's giving, he earned without effort. How? Durch Halach Mischer was an easy business deal. Or the Yerusha, or it was some sort of an inheritance. A Metzia, or you found something Yitzvah. Sees nor, but still, giving somebody even things you didn't work on, is not whatever is down in Tanya, that was Vibaldas with them, is Yochel Liknes Chaye Nafshe. With this money that he is giving away, he could purchase things to sustain a life. So he's giving you money that can buy life. It turns out that he's giving away his Chaye Nafshe. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya Perek Lamed Zayin. Ashein kein de Tvua was git up als peye veleket chulu, but the grain that he gives as peye leket etc. is das azach was es kommt durch sein Yigia. This is something that comes through his effort. In Charisha, Zriya, in plowing, and sowing, chulu, und the Nordic Tzira. And then you have to cut it. It's the sweat of your face you will eat bread, meaning it's a lot of hard work to get to that. So was the far is the drosha for Rabbi Avardivos, Teres Koinim. That's why when the quoting of the drosha Rabbi Kiva in Teres Koinim, Malin Olavakosu, that this is like making a Beis Hamikdash Kaim and is bringing the korbanos. When does he get this big schus? Shayich be'iker by leket shikho upeya. By leket shikho upeya. Umaiseroni. And the tithing of the tenth is also in the field. All this is mentioned, all these cases are mentioned there because they have this common denominator. So even though the Pasuk didn't say that, and the Pasuk says Lekadopeya, but that's understood as the Teres Kohanim brings down because all of them are associated with the field that he worked at. Only by tzedakah stam, but that would not apply to general tzedakah because over there it's not necessarily that effort that goes into the field. But Rashi doesn't even mention the other. That's why Teres Kohanim. But Rashi, we said before, only brings down sicha and does not bring down the Maiseron. Rashi touches up at Goshen Yosefes. Rashi says it with additional emphasis as the Yigia in der Tfuas Oretz was Gita weg zum Oni. And when we talk about the effort in the grain of the field that he gives to the poor person, and when does he does it? He gives it away to the poor person even before he takes for himself. Und das noch eider nimmt die Tvua zu sich. It's even before he is able to take the grain for himself. Und dann geht von hier, and then you give Truma, Meiser, Bechulu. So that's a step. Already you brought it into your possession, and when you take it, you give Truma Meiser. And noch them is a nana, then you can enjoy the grain from the bread, etc., that you receive from your grain. So here, the emphasis that Rashi wants to bring away, he's giving away not only at the time that after he gives it away, he's able to collect, to eat himself and enjoy it. He's giving it away before he can even enjoy it. Is dos nit nervous? So, but here you're doing it prior to even enjoying it. So therefore, Rashi says it's nit nor. Therefore, makrik ven karbonis is not only as the lotion of the Teres Kohanim, as if he brought karbonis, because in other words, there's a Beis Hamikdash already, and we're counting. Oh, you're bringing karbonis, you're giving a gift away. Nor oich over here said kilubana Beis Hamikdash. It's like you're building the Beis Hamikdash. This bedugmas havoida ve'agia in binyan Beis Hamikdash, similar to the work and the effort in building the Beis Hamikdash, was kommt eider makriv karbonis dort before you're bringing the korbanos. So Rashi, that's what Rashi changes around the Lashonis, and he says, kilu, not kilu, it says kilu bono, because we're talking about even prior to the time when you bring it in, then there's other trumas, you still are going to build the Beis Hamikdash. You're else going to put the effort in. And here you're already, before you're even going to get a chance to eat from the grain, you're already giving away the leket, the peya, and the sicha, but not the ma'aser, because the ma'aser comes afterwards. And in them vergleich ches. And in this comparison, my lol kilo Beis Hamikdash kayim, either as it's existing or the bono Beis Hamikdash already built, as Rashi said, unikriv korbanos of zanedot tzveinyon. Over here we have the two ideas. And the Rebbe is going to explain now the change of language from the Teres Koinim, who uses the lashon of Yoitzi, or the lashon of Rashi, Rashi says that that whether it's Noisen, it's the Nesina or his expense. Let's look inside. It's what it cost him or what the poor person is receiving. In dem Vergleich, Aleph. One is the Ravek Nemen from Zich, is the part you take it from yourself. It's not that even for them Eberstein, because the Eberstein says you're giving away something yours. You were able to acquire your life and you're giving it away. This is an item that he reaches, he receives through effort that he does with his energy, with his vitality, with the powers of his soul. The main thing is we're talking about how it impacts the person. To take away from yourself. The other one is what you give, based on the given. The second point is to give etzadat tzivui from the Meibershter, because of the command to give it. The zach that you given to anointed, you gave it to a poor person. What's the difference if it's the taking, you giving up, or the emphasis is on the recipient to give it, that you're giving it away, or it's either the taking away from yourself or the giving it away to somebody else. The nafkamina vision, the tzvei, the difference between these two, that he get at Gosh is that you get an inyan. Was nimmt weg von sich als Sach, was gebunden mit Geist Nafshe, if the main emphasis, the precious of this matter, why is it so precious? That you take something from yourself, something which is your life, your money, your effort, you're giving it away. You're taking it away. So then it doesn't really matter how the poor person gets it, because we're talking about your sacrifice to giving up from yourself. Is in them given, if the main of is the giving. Then it's important how the shleimus and the sinna to give it in a complete way. Das ist der Chile zwischen Loschen von Rabbi Avadimus, wie steht in Teres Koinim, the way of Avadimus as it's stated in Teres Koinim, es wird gebracht in Pirish Rashi, how it's brought in Rashi. In Teres Koinim is the Chiddush Vashvohanal von Leket Chulus Korbanos in this novelty and the comparison for Leket to Korbanos in Dembas is Moitzi, the Tvu of Zayin. There's mainly that he spends it, goes out, takes it out of his field. The Riber is there Moisif Oich Shikha Maisroni. Therefore, he also adds by sicha and meiser. Was einen legamri gleich to leket and peya. They would be totally the same to leket and peya in them was that is moitzi for sein rishus, in the fact that he gives out from his possession the tvua was kommt the kapov, that he gives the grain that comes from his effort. He's expanding it. He's doing it. That applies to the leket that he gives for what's left over the peya, and also the meiser ani that he would give, and the shikha, everything what you're giving away. But if the main thing is the poor, there it makes a difference. Kavon Mashenk and Rashi was his madgish. Rashi, who emphasizes those was noisen laoni karoi, that you're giving properly to the poor person. It's a proper giving to the poor person. Is a moisin nor shikha, is only adds shikha. Hayois as nor shikha is bedoimet seleket the peya. Only shikha is similar like paying them. Was the nisina is both naroi. That's a fitting giving. What does it mean of fitting giving? Fitting giving. Die alle drei mitzvahs, these three mitzvahs, leket, shicha, and peya, sind gleich in them. They're equal in the fact, was nicht nur gitter avek Sachen bei seiner verbunden mit chayes nafshe. Not only that he's giving away items that are connected with his life of his soul, nor the nisina is in Ashleim is the kneif, but he's giving it in a wholesome way. The noisen hat nit dabei afilu ketevus hana. The one who gives doesn't even have a benefit. He doesn't have who to give it. You leave it in the field, any poor person comes. You for leket the shikha. When you give meiser ani, you have a little bit of a say. You're going to choose the ani you give it to. The noise not the bad looking at is not. Noise and koroyu, meaning you're giving it away properly. If it's meiseroni, you can give it away. If it's a gitas la abdul amosi, or the tzanoy and even an non kids way, can give it either to your slave, your maidservant, your servant, or other people that are close to him. So you have some benefit from it. Rashi's over mashmid meiseroni. But Rashi doesn't want to mention Meiser on it. Yois, as in them, because the one who gives has a benefit. Kendos geben to the anigim vaser kleibtuis, he's able to give it to the poor people that he chooses. Vazayin krevim, their relatives, Mahai Taima, for the same reason, Zeich mer masim der Vergleich von Kilu, Bona Beis Hamikdash. It's as if you built the base of Mikdash, not base of Mikdash kind. It's not that the base of Mikdash exists and you bring karbanos, but you're actually building it. Or der binyan is durch ayigia, because this building is through an effort. Was your tachlis is da noah for jeden Eden, von alle Eden. That is the purpose, is the benefit of all Yid and each Jew now Yid. From Klal Yisrael, all Jewish people. Nit nor ki ilu hu makriv korbanos of the toicha farzich. It's not just as if he's bringing the korbanos for himself. So this is how the Rebbe explains the change of Loshen from the Rashi, from the Teres Kahanim. The Teres Kahanim just says, "Hu makriv korbanos." In other words, not that there's not the effort there, not the building. Rashi chooses to say, "Ki'ilu bona beis hamikdash," to tell you that there's the effort over here. So here, that's what the comparison to the Matnes Hanim that Rashi discusses from the gifts from the field. Tess. As wert over the Shaila, but now we still have to explain, but what about Oilois? And what about Peret? Wert over the Shaila, di alle Protim, in Leket Shikhopeya, all these details in Leket Shikhopeya is masim is dugmosum doich by oilos. Similar to that also exists by oilos. Uperet karmachov is the Torah of ze ongezogt zusammen. There, the Torah is already instructed together with these command of paper like it's a meshtamon. So why aren't they mentioned? Why does he not also add oilos uperet? They're not written in this pasuk. Is a doch meisiv sicha, but he does bring down the sicha over here, even though the pasuk only says, because that is still conceptually, it has the same thing as leket and peya. So why doesn't he bring down the peret and oilos? The Rebbe brings Rashi in the Kasha, the Girsa from Rabbi Avardimus. That's why he brings down the Girsa of the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippurim, the Chag Mikan. We're adding the Chag Yom Tov zu Matgish sein. As do Retzich wegen der Zeit von Koidem HaChag. We're talking about the time that is before Chag. The Chag is the second part. Here we're talking about before the time of Chag. Torah placed it in the time for the Chag. Fardem Zman from Ba'ospechem es Tfuas Haaretz. Before the time that you gather the Haaretz, which is B'Chag HaSukkos. The Far is the Masim to the Ramon and Nor Shikha. And that's why it's only fitting that Shikha was these Shaykh and Zman. That applies which time? In the time that is before Ospechem. From Tzir Artzechem, that is in the time of when you cut, aber nicht the mitzvahs von Oilos, uperet karmecha, was man is bechlal speter, bimei Chag HaSukkos. When you, the trees, and when you take off from the grapes and the Oilos, that mitzvah not to, and leave that for the poor people, that applies later on. B'mei Chag HaSukkos. Und das ist euch meisiv biur. This also adds explanation. Was Rashi bringt die Girse, welche is mash mit Meiseroni. In addition to what we said before, Rashi doesn't bring down the Meiseroni. Warum euch die Nisina, the Nisinas Meiseroni for Tvus Haaretz, because also when you give Meiseroni from the grain of the land, is al derech harogel zusammen mit Nisinas Meiser from Yekvach B'chulu. Together with those, when you give it, the other Meiser is Mana Osif, when you gather it. Euch kommt das la'acharei, da asifas hatfus va'pedes in Bais, and also it comes after you gather the grain and fruit and havadosis is Mana Chakinah, that comes Yontif. So therefore, Meiser Oni is not the time yet. So here, Pasha time-wise, the Torah place, so that's why Rashi doesn't mention it. Yesh Leimar, as euch mitzadem is Meiser Oni nit legamri b'doimet leket shichon peya. That also for this reason, that it's done later on together, it's also another reason why it's not totally like leket shichon peya. Rashi doesn't mention it. In them was called Anoisim v'chulo malin olav achilubona beis hamikdash v'ikriv of korbanos. To compare it, that if you give these gifts, it's as if you build a beis hamikdash. It doesn't apply so well to Meiseroni. V'bal das the nisina for Meiseroni is nit yad niyor. You don't give it every day, every year. We leket, just like leket chulu nor emol in drayor once in 3 years when you have to give Meiseroni. The Rebbe drickt sich in them nit oisef, as I feel that's why he doesn't express to that extent. As I get the mitavek sein chayis nafshay, that he gives away his vitality of his soul by the 100 mitzvahs as the other above mentioned mitzvahs. Similarly, also by the orchard. Was is nit amozin hechrech. That's not a food, a necessity from the mention. So you don't see so much that you give it away to others, giving away not what you need. This, in addition, also was the tircha, the troubling the neti of chulu b'kerem, when you have to plant by an orchard, is nit the mesech zman rav yed yor. It's not in a long, doesn't take a long time. It's not every year. Vibatfus asoda as in the grain of the field. So we want to compare the effort that is more in sowing the ground and not by planting an orchard, which is much less. So therefore, it doesn't have that comparison. And now the Rebbe is going to continue the rest of the Rashi is explaining. Yud. Is Rashi mefarish tazeh. As a follow-up to this, Rashi explains what does it mean you should leave them. So in Pashtus, Rashi only has to explain because this is the second time. This has to have something addition to tell us why we already, the first time we learn it simply. In Kedoshim, leave the corner of the field, don't collect leket kitzircha, and leave it for the poor person. But here, why is the Torah saying this again? This must come to tell us an additional instruction which would enhance your giving, that Rashi, the theme what we're talking about. The Hamshach Lazeh is Rashi Mefarish, Tazib, Hanech Lifneim V'em Yilketu, leave it before them, let them collect on their own. You cannot help, should not help any of them. Beim ersten Tzivui of the mitzvahs in Parsha Kedoshim, the first time when the Torah tells this mitzvah in the portion of Kedoshim, where state law, over there where it says leave it for the Oni and the Ger, that Rashi nit mefarish zayin. Rashi doesn't need to explain what it means. Well, this is moving pashtus. Self-understood as the Torah kum dort zogen. The Torah is coming there to tell you in Vosses Bashtein the mitzvahs, what the mitzvahs consist of from Pei V'Leket V'Chul. How is the mitzvah done? Torah says, Loi Zechala Pasotcha, don't destroy the corner of the field, don't finish the corner of the field. You should leave it, nor what you should do with that. Tells you what to do. Leave it for the ger. Because the pirish from taziv is what does it mean, taziv? Rashi doesn't have to explain it. It means leave it simply. As opposed to in our parsha. Over here, though in our parsha base, we know already the content and how to fulfill the mitzvahs as they pay you, like a darfman that you have to leave it for the poor people. And those were the posting zog do nochamal, and the reason why the Torah says here again, is in order to add as kol aneisen leket shivcho peya, that giving leket shivcho peya kiroi is mildly all of kilo butter base and make the drink of carbonas as if it was microgonal kinalex before to mad gizayin, to emphasize as the nesina is ba'ifun haroi b'shleimus, that this giving is in a proper and in a wholesome way, because as the balasota the field to the extent that the owner of the field doesn't even get a benefit like by to decide who gets it, like by my Saroni, or the tzedakah is move on. Tzedakah in general, there's no effort, but even there's an effort, it's move on. Therefore, it's understood that also this addition, since also this matter we already know for the portion of Kedoshim. It's in the prat for shleimus and nesina. It's coming to add in the detail of how do you get a wholesome giving. Ubemela shlilas hana, which means negating any benefit deriving from them, from them nice from the giver. Is the riba is Rashi mefarish taziv hanach lifneim. Leave it before them. Then yilkatu, let them go collect. Ve'ein l'chol l'sayeh la'achad mehem. You don't help any one of them. An additional insight that when you don't benefit don't even help anyone. Need nor hot need the toivasano is to climb women for the name to give. Not only do you not have the benefit to decide who is going to get from the poor people, you're not allowed to even have benefit to help somebody in collecting it. So in Nemedos in Gansen Alain, they take this totally by themselves. Okay, so now, why does Rashi bring down the name that Rebbe explains? A sharp student can still ask if the Pirush of Rabbi Vardimus on this interpretation of Vardimus. He says that everybody who gives Lek properly is if you build a Beis Hamikdash. Why is this such a big deal? What is he giving away? I mean, the amount of pay, the amount of leket is a minimal amount. And here we're saying you're giving away your life and everything else. Rabbi Dimas explains this as this is something which is the name, as we'll bring down, we'll see that this is something which is really a sacrifice by giving it. In Vosbashteit Fort, the grace of Maila, in what still consists this great advantage from them was a nemtzu, from the fact that he takes away, you give something away, not having your own benefit. Why do we consider this such a big thing? Especially in usually it says we're not talking about a large amount. One or two stalks of the lekets, that's the din of leket. More than that, you can go back collect. The por vergessen is the few forgotten stalks, other the shibol mepasas other, or the stalks in the field, edge of the field, the corner of the field, the peya. Since there's no measure in the pasuk, there's no share how much to leave the corner. If you leave one stalk in the corner, you fulfill their obligation in the Torah. Even in the Rabbanon is a shir for Echad Mishishim 160. That's what. So let it be true. Since it comes from the effort of your hand, you worked in it. So even something small is very precious. Loit Pirush Rashi is doch der Iker, der Eufen Hanesino. But according to Rashi, it's not mainly is how you're giving it. You're giving it properly to the Oni. So why is this such a great matter? He built the Beis Hamikdash and he offered the Kabbalas inside. If that brings Rashi, Rashi also brings the author of the statement, Rabbi Avar doing this. Chazal in Yerushalmi, our sages tell us in the Jerusalem Talmud, as Yehuda Yishhutzi hat sich behalten, that Yehuda Yishhutzi hid himself for 3 years, for 3 years, 3 days. Again, he wanted to figure out Menayin Shechaye Ir Hazois Koidman Lechaye Ir Acheres. How do we know that you're supposed to support the life of the city that you come from is precedent? You have to protect it before the life of another city. So Oslo Rabbi Yosef, so he came to find out this. Rabbi Yehuda Ishutza came to find out, where do we know this from? So he came to Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef gerufen sein Sohn Rabbi Avirudimus. He called his son Avirudimus. As all in Zogun, that he should tell him how the time of where do we know this thing that the life of this city takes place before the life of another city? So Amar Lei, because the pasuk says Tiyeno Ha'orima Eila, these cities, Tiyeno Ir Ve'ir. First comes the cities. And then comes the lots around it. So you see that there is a a precedent for each of the cities that is around you. The issue over there in the Gemara is, let's say that there is a well, and one of them can use it. Who gets it first? So, and then he says that if there's people that are closer to the well, who comes first? And we hit over there is to be able to learn this halacha over there. It says in the Yerushalmi, and so he learned them. He says that you have to give first the one of this city that the Mayan is there. They would take precedent to use it before somebody else. So he told him, "Amar leiti yana ha'orim ha'eles," the pasuk in Yeshua. So it talks about the cities of the Levim, which are also the Orei Miklot. So it says Tiyena Orei Ma'ela. So it says Tiyena Ir, these cities first, and then Umigdashel Sovri. So it seems that they come secondary, come the other ones. The Rebbe brings down the orders, the different lush in the Bavli. But in any event, to us, the issue is, why didn't he call him and tell him that he should answer? Why didn't he tell him the source of this halacha? Especially as Rabbi Yosef is there was gesagt dem din. He is the one that said this halacha. So why does he send them to his son? The foolish verstanding, this was something that his son was this halacha was something dear to him. Verstanding as their inyan is given the Rabbi Avur Dimas' limud miyuchad. That was his special study. Haderach v'mizokt of Rabbi Yehuda. Similar as we say about Rabbi Yehuda as kol tenuyim b'nezikin habe. All that he would study would always be the Nezikin, the tractate Nezikin, the order of Nezikin. If Rabbi Akiva would say Klach l'cha on the goyim b'holis, which means that he didn't go and study the goyim and holis. It means some people studied various different things. It was his learning. He had a specific interest, and he was fired up with this idea, and the halacha that the city's people's life come first. And the Farad Rabbi Yosef Giruf, that's why he called it, was haste. It means that Nuif Rabbi Avurdimus is in their minion. That this is Rabbi Avurdimus's idea. As Alpi Torah is the Aniyim Vazayin enter to him. And according to the Torah, the poor people that are closer to him, even you don't really know him, it's just the same city. They get preference. The Gabadin Nani was invited from him that are further from him. So apparently the question is not about the well, this is a question about the poor people who gets first. So what do we see from this Rabbi Verdimas? If you should also move on, the understand the great novelty in the idea in our case. As Noisen Lekhet Shikho Peya Lo Nikaroi, that you give lecture Malino Kilabona. We understand why it's such a big deal. For Dian Hoge was Monzich by Lekhet Shikho Peya, because this conduct that we're demanding from the person as will nit magdim zayin, not to give preference to those that are close to them, or or people of the city in general. For others is hepechtive. This is against the nature, as it should be apitoido. You have to give to the one that's close to you. And yet he didn't do that to the one that is closer. So that is a big sacrifice. And that's why Rashi brings this name. Yud Beis. Based on the above, we can say wondrous things. So here it comes out, the Rebbe learns is coming to increase the level of Nesina Kiroi by giving it totally away and without getting involved, Tazev Oisom, which is different than it appears in the Rambam. The Rambam Paskin was the Rambam rules as Peya, Nazoich Leket Vishikha is a lava nitach lesson. He says it's a prohibition that has been attached or given to make up the asa. The person violated and he cut off the whole field. He did not leave any payer connected. He's like takes a little bit from what he cut and he gives that to the poor people. Forgiving it is a positive mitzvah. So you have the mitzvah of taziv oisom. Shenemar lo nivelagir taziv oisom, that you should give it to the poor person and to the stranger. Leave it them. Oh, but Rashi, but according to Rashi, turns out it's not a love that is given to a positive. The pasuk loni is nitkin archiv mitzvah. It's not a new obligation. Mitzvah is manatik dem lav, which undoes, detaches the lav by giving it to the poor person. The loni v'lager tazav esom. But what is this doing? But state in Parshas Kedoshim is metayed them from kim alav. That just describes how we do the lav. Don't cut the corner and leave it for the poor person. That's just describing how it's done. And in this pasuk over here, in the pasuk in Emor, this is coming to the contrary. Nor moisiv zayin in them heder hanoah. This is coming to add in the lack of benefit, lack of how much you should not benefit. Shouldn't even be giving it. Everybody takes themselves. Another style. When you give it to the Oni Neger, when we give it to them in a situation that you leave it for them, as that they should take themselves. When that hot the Tevis on off and Geben, he doesn't get the benefit from the giving. It's not a side, an additional detail on the mitzvah like shichapeya. This becomes the boundary, the definition of mitzvah. The gather mitzvah is nit nor der inyan for mitzi leket shichapeya. It's not just, as the Tereskanim says, to spend and give out lek shichapeya. They're nice. The giving lek shichapeya, to give it in a proper way. That you have to leave it for them. Leave it for them so you don't get involved and give it totally away. Gimel from them, in Yenushal Torah from Pirush Rashi. We learn how the instruction, the enter of Rashi, Evifulas is Nageya Zakim Mitzvah. It's important that the observance of mitzvah, Fila Mitzvah Kala, even when we're talking about a lights mitzvah, which spoilers Achas Peteres Kinal Sividalov. One stalk can exempt the whole field. So here you see such a light mitzvah, and still though the Tom better with an Emerson on companies I know it should be done in the truth without any ulterior motives and any benefits. On the other hand, how it's important to push yourself. You have to push your Yetzer Hara, your inclination. When you see the donkey of your enemy leaning under its load, you may help him. His mitzvah is the mitzvah is if you have two people to help to unload, help the enemy in order to Yetzer, because to force Yetzer Hara because you don't like it, Daf can go help. Was I feel to the extent as Davki Mitzadem was is became the mitzvah from Lekech, that's specifically because he fulfilled the Lekech. Hey, the opposite, which the nature of Torah is, you want to give it, you want to help, you want to give it to the as Bizdaka Tam Gitarani Makroim Freya. General Zdaka, you give those who are first, but here you don't give first. Here you get like you're building the Beis Hamikdash and you brought the Kabbanis inside it. When you occupy yourself to change around the Midois Lativin, your natural traits, until you change the nature of the Midas as the two languages, Vert fun Mailin Olav Ki'ilu. From this, we count it as if they're being Beis Hamikdash Kipshutoi, not anymore as if, but you build the Beis Hamikdash literally. Shom Nasa Lefanecha, Kimisas Ritzonecha, over there will do for you as the mitzvah of your will in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, in the third Beis Hamikdash, Sheibone B'Mehedu B'Yameinu Mamish will be built speedily in our days. Mamish. This is Mesichas Mitzvah Shabbos Kodesh Parshas Emor Tavshin Lamed Ches.